All right, everyone. We're here to talk about aesthetics in synthetic art. Now, aesthetic is quite difficult to define. What is aesthetics according to you? By the way, I'm here with Srividya Kanaramashandran, and I'm Alex Corbinitz. So what is aesthetic according to you? How do we apply principles of aesthetics to synthetic art?
All right, starting with the deep question.
Hey, you wrote it.
So aesthetics, if we think about the definition per se, aesthetics is how we experience something. It relates to perception, it relates to feelings, emotions, and experience itself. So when it comes to art, I think the way you experience art defines the aesthetic of an art. But more recently, we've thought about, we use aesthetics as a way to classify art. Like we say that Andy Warhol has a cool aesthetic, or some music has a jazz aesthetic. So that's kind of how we use it now, but aesthetics is the experience of a piece of art itself. Did I get that?
And so in terms of synthetic art, how do we apply the principles of aesthetics, some of which you were just mentioning, to making art synthetically?
Yes. So traditional art forms have gone through several periods of transformation, and we've gotten to, they've evolved over the years. We started with when Michelangelo was painting the Sistine Chapel. We started there, and then we went to, more recently, we went to Impressionism, Expressionism. There were these Italian futurists and all of those abstract expressionists that followed, pop art to Jeff Koons' balloons. We've gone through so many different stages. And when we go through each of those different stages of art, the art world, the art community that comprises agents and artists and people that go to the museum shows, curators, all of them have to redefine how we look at that art and how we call a piece of work art. So that definition has to evolve for every new style of art that comes about. And I think AI-generated art or synthetic art is going through its very initial stages. It's still a baby in the art world, and the art world has not yet caught up to how to define it. And I think therein lies the excitement for me as an artist, because I'm doing stuff that nobody knows what it is.
So first of all, that's really awesome and super exciting. That leads me to my next question, though, which is very timely. Just last month at Christie's, there was a big sale of art that was generated with using machine learning models. And at Christie's, they sold this for a record of somewhere in several $100,000, and they trained a model based on hundreds of years of portraiture, classic art historical portraits, as well as, I'm sure, a much vaster data set than all the famous ones we've studied in class. Weren't people doing this years ago? What's new about this recent recognition by the art world? And does that change anything about the way you think about making synthetic art today?
Yes, I have thoughts about the Christie's auction. I think the number was $432.5K.
Wow.
It was ridiculous. They thought they were going to sell something for $7,000, and it ended up being $400,000. And
it's quite the valuation.
I know, right? So I think my first reaction to that was awesome. The fact that the AI-generated art is now on the mainstream makes it easier for the rest of us to get noticed, and for AI critics to start to think about evaluating AI-generated art. But that particular piece itself was not one of my favorites. And I think it's a novelty item that to be able to afford to buy a piece of AI, the first piece of AI-generated art at a Christie's auction in New York is huge bragging rights. And for that, it's awesome that whoever could afford that, amazing.
Yeah, totally cool.
Wait, what was the second part of your question?
I was just going to say, how does that change the way you think about synthetic art and making it as an artist and as a practitioner of machine learning?
Wait, I actually, I may not answer that question directly, but
Okay.
you know, when I went, when you go to the MoMA, they have a really, I think it's still there, they have a blue scarf that's really beautiful. It's a silk scarf, and it has words written on it. The words say, modern art equals, wait, what does it say? I forgot.
No worries.
Oh, modern art equals, I could have done that, plus, yeah, but you didn't.
Oh yes, I love that. That's always my response to people who don't appreciate modern art. I'm like, yeah, but you didn't. Someone had to be there to do it first, and that's why it's special and important.
Yes, I have a coffee mug that says that, and I love that coffee mug.
That's awesome. I want a coffee mug like that. So moving on to the next question about synthetic art, which kind of our last question just kind of segues into that. What is synthetic about synthetic art? Why is it synthetic and not, actual, or unsynthetic, natural? What is the implication of this? And does synthetic mean artificial? Let's muse on the word synthetic for a while.
Sure. If you're talking about the title of this piece per se, I honestly don't remember why I put that title, Aesthetics of Synthetic Art. But maybe it was a category in MLconf. I don't remember. But I use aesthetics and synthetic art because of the alliterative nature of that title, and I just like the sound of it. But synthetic art is not new, and generative art is not new either. So in the 1970s, artists started to use, software engineers basically, started to use computers to generate images. And that art movement has been around for a long time, and it's rules-based. They generate art, music, poetry in a rules-based fashion. What the leap of faith from there to AI-generated art is actually when you go from rules-based to not rules-based. Like, I'm not telling the AI what a landscape is with code. I'm not telling it to look for a horizon. I'm not telling it to look for the sky. I'm not telling it to look for the interesting stuff at the horizon or the foreground. None of that is programmed. The computer is learning representations without me having to program it. I think that's where the interesting leap of technology takes us from computer-generated art, which is typically rules-based, to a more AI-generated art. I think I'm fascinated by where we are and what technology has allowed us to do, and I can't wait to see what everybody else does with it.
That's awesome. I'm excited as well. So here's a question. What is can you elaborate on the distinction between using artificial intelligence as a tool to create synthetic art versus suggesting that a model that you've trained on art, and perhaps a generative model that you're sampling from, is in fact the creator? Like, where does the boundary between sort of authorship and artistry begin and end? Or am I just inflating the expectations of AI by even suggesting that the AI could create it in the first place?
I think you are, but it's a good question, and we should continue to ask that question for several years, because maybe we will have an answer to that question, but today we don't. So I don't think, at least the models that I have trained are not autonomous. They are not able to generate something completely without my intervention. You definitely have a training set. You definitely have to classify your training data and then feed it into the network, obviously. They're not autonomous. So I use the model, the neural network, as a tool. But if they start, maybe they will become autonomous 20 years from now. I don't know. Can't wait.
Yeah, and I mean, and you're intervening, and you're telling it
Yes.
what to do. You're giving it the training data and building all the pipelines. Even though when you take a sample, even from like an LSTM or something, it's still purely statistical and deterministic. But it's the way that the artist builds upon that and creates it and mixes it around that gives it unique artistry of the human who's creating it.
Yes, there is
cool.
a statistical and deterministic element to it, and I think you can also introduce that jitter or whatever to create something new. Like somebody else in the morning talk was talking about how you randomize the weights and then see what happens. right, in a neural network. That could be something I want to
Oh
experiment
yeah,
with.
the concept vectors sound like a really cool application to synthetic art. Thanks to Bean for that inspiration.
Yes, I was inspired by the talk this morning. So we'll see. It's a very exciting field, and we have a lot to learn and experiment with.
Awesome. We've just got a couple minutes left, so I'd love to ask another question about synthetic art. In particular, I'd love to ask about the uniqueness of synthetic art in this world where, maybe when Michelangelo was painting the Sistine Chapel, there's
It
only
was
one
unique.
of them. It's unique. It took forever. Now in this world, we have such a wealth of data and computing power. We can, with less maybe effort in terms of time than Michelangelo, be able to create new works of art. So does the idea of synthetic art and generating it, does it create some sort of inflation or devaluation? Or what are your thoughts on the fact that it's so easy to copy in this sort of age of mechanical reproduction?
We asked this question when digital cameras came along too, right? Even before that, before the digital camera, when the camera came along, we were
Right.
like, ooh, what's going to happen to people who have been painting? That definitely introduces other variables that we did not consider when we started. So, but then when digital cameras came along, the concept, the aesthetic of photography emerged, and from there we now have cell phone cameras. Everybody has a digital camera. Everybody has a camera. So again, the concept of art and what you get, the aesthetic that these tools allow you to, the aesthetics of what they generate changes, and it'll be interesting to see how we define and evolve the aesthetics of AI-generated art. Maybe AI-generated art will go through phases like the Impressionists went through, or the pointillism stuff that Cézanne did. We started at pointillism, then we went to Impressionism, then we went to Expressionism. AI-generated art will go through those phases.
I think this is exciting. I feel like maybe photography was the greatest thing that ever happened to painting, because we started moving away from representational art. Maybe now synthetic art and using machine learning will be the next great phase after the introduction of the camera in terms of its effect on art.
Yes.
Well, with that, thank you so much for your time. And we're going to move on to the next set of presentations.
And if you have any more questions, my booth is right by the coffee, so stop by.
All right.
I know you will stop by there for coffee, so come talk to me. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, Alex.